The afternoon in Maple Ridge carried that strange stillness right before the evening wind arrived. The air was warm and dry, the sky painted gold by a lowering sun. Officer Nate Walker had driven down these cracked streets more times than he could count. Yet today, something pressed against the back of his mind, a heaviness he couldn't name. Rex, his old German Shepherd partner, usually rested quietly during patrols. But this time, the dog was different. 10 years old, scarred from a lifetime of duty, Rex suddenly rose in the back seat of the cruiser. His silver-streaked coat bristled, ears forward, muscles tense. A low whine rumbled in his throat, the kind that meant something was deeply wrong. Nate's grip tightened on the wheel. When Rex barked, short, sharp, commanding, Nate's instincts sharpened instantly. He slowed the cruiser, eyes narrowing at the storefront ahead. The Pine and Paw's veterinary supply shop had always been a tired place, its signs squeaking against the wind, its windows filmed with dust. But through the glass, Nate's gaze locked on something that made his chest tighten. Under a buzzing light, where pet harnesses should have been displayed, hung 3 tiny German Shepherd puppies suspended from butcher-style hooks. They're small. Bodies hung limp in the harnesses like lifeless bundles. Above them dangled a cardboard sign written in thick black marker, $1 for all. Nate's jaw clenched so hard it hurt. Rex barked again, pawing at the back door, desperate to get closer. Inside, the shop reeked. Antiseptic fought to cover something rotten underneath, and the sour-sweet mix hit Nate's nose like a warning. His boots struck heavy against the worn linoleum as he pushed through the door. Rex stayed pressed close, his presence a silent shield. Behind the counter, Mr. Lell stood like a man who had forgotten shame long ago. Wiry, late 50s, jaw sunken, comb over thin as spiderweb, and yellow-stained fingers fiddling with a toothpick. His smile was small, sharp, and wrong. "Afternoon, officer," Lell muttered lazily. "Something I can help you with?" Nate didn't answer. He was already kneeling at the rack. Rex nosed each puppy gently, testing for life, licking their weak faces one by one. The smallest paw twitched. The middle pup tried to flick its tail. The biggest lay heavy, shallow breaths, barely moving his chest. Nate's voice was low, calm, but edged like a blade. "What the hell is this?" Lell shrugged as if it were nothing. "Some guy dropped 'em off a couple days back, said they were worthless. Been feeding 'em scraps, thought I'd sell 'em cheap, clear space. Did he give you a name?" Nate asked flatly. "Nope. Just said mutts ain't worth his gas to come back for," Rex growled, deep and menacing, stepping between Nate and the counter. His scarred body tensed, his presence enough to silence any false bravado. Nate stood, pulling a single crumpled dollar from his wallet. He slapped it on the counter, the sound echoing sharp in the hollow shop. "Unhook that sign. They're mine now." Lell smirked, raising his hands in mock innocence. "Hey, you got a receipt? Do I look like I'm in the mood for jokes?" But Nate wasn't joking. The 3 pups were bundled inside his jacket, pressed against his chest. They were fragile warmth against the cold disgust crawling through him. One pup, a sharp-eyed female who dared to nibble his thumb despite her weakness, would later be called Ember. The big male with the round belly and unflinching stare would earn the name Bruno, and the smallest, trembling leaf of a pup who buried her face into his collar would become Piper. Nate turned to leave, but not before cutting Lell a final glance. His voice was low and steady, promising more than words. "If I find out they were harmed under your roof, I'll have a warrant so fast you won't know what hit you." Lell only scoffed, but his eyes flickered. Outside, the wind had stilled. Rex trotted beside Nate, gaze never leaving the shop door as though daring Lell to follow. At the cruiser, Nate spread an old fleece blanket in the back. Rex climbed in first, then nosed the puppies gently as Nate laid them down. They pressed close to each other, 3 fragile bodies finding safety in the warmth of the old dog's side. By the next morning, the cruiser rolled up to Jensen Veterinary and Rescue. The brick building sat modestly behind the hardware store, sunlight glinting off its clean windows. A wooden chime tinkled softly above the door, a calm sound that contrasted sharply with the turmoil in Nate's chest. Inside, the smell of coffee mixed with dog shampoo and disinfectant. Dr. Mara Jensen stepped out from behind the counter. Slim, mid-40s, hair braided loosely over her shoulder, hazel eyes that saw too much, and a body still leaning slightly from an old injury that never fully healed. She had gentle hands but no patience for cruelty. She opened the half door. "What? Did you drag in this time, Walker?" "3 puppies," Nate replied. His voice was tight. "German shepherds. Found them hanging in a rack at Pine and Paws. $1 for all. I need full exams." Mara's breath caught. God! She hurried to clear the exam table. Nate set the pups down gently. Rex stationed himself by the cabinet, his scarred body taut with alertness. Ember growled faintly at the cold metal. Piper whimpered and tried to shrink away. Bruno simply lay flat, his chest rising slow and shallow. Mara pulled on gloves and began. She checked Bruno first, then frowned, her hands pressed carefully against his side. "See this?" she pointed. "Clean injection site. Recent." She clicked on a UV light, shining it along his fur. A faint greenish glow bloomed. "I've seen this before," she said grimly. "Cheap breeders use hormones, sometimes steroids. Illegal. They try to bulk them up fast." "Deadly?" Nate asked. "Especially for shepherds. Their livers can't handle it." One by one, she examined Ember and Piper. Both glowed under the light. Multiple injection sites. Ember flinched but endured. Piper panicked, trying to leap off the table. Nate's hand steadied her instinctively, but it was Rex who calmed her. He stepped forward, licking her ear softly until her trembling eased. Mara's voice dropped. "That's not just fear. That's learned fear. She's been conditioned." Nate's stomach twisted, but he said nothing. Mara began cleaning a cut on Piper's shoulder. "All of them have injection marks. This wasn't medical. This was modification. Black market breeders trying to sell them higher." The words hung heavy. Then Rex stiffened. His nose twitched, head snapping toward the baseboard heater under. The counter. He let out a sharp huff, then began sniffing insistently. Nate crouched beside him. "You got something, boy?" Rex scratched at the wall paneling once, then barked, short, deliberate, certain. Mara frowned. "That heater's broken. We haven't used it since March." Nate reached underneath, fingers brushing something wedged tight. He pulled out a small resealable bag, cloudy with dust. Inside were 2 capped syringes and a torn piece of paper with smudged numbers written in marker. A XT448K9. Mara leaned. "Over." "That's not ours." "You sure?" "Positive. That code AXT. That's a compound name. We used to carry it 5 years ago, but it got pulled from shelves. Too many side effects. Someone's using your clinic as a drop site." Mara's expression hardened. "Not on my watch." Nate sealed the bag and made a note to send it to the lab. Piper crawled to the edge of the table and pressed her nose into Rex's fur. The old dog didn't move, just sat still, letting her find what warmth she could. Mara sighed. "They're not strays, Nate. They're remnants. Leftovers from someone trying to cut profit margins too tight. I've seen a few cases like this. Different breeds, same results. Usually, they don't make it this long. Have you reported?" "It," she nodded. "Filed 2 reports. No follow-up." "I'll file one that doesn't get buried," Nate said. He turned to Rex. "You did good, old boy." Rex wagged his tail once. That was enough. Back in the cruiser, Nate secured the evidence bag, then glanced back at the 3 pups. Amber was sitting upright now, ears alert. Bruno, belly up, was snoring. Piper rested her head on Rex's side, her breathing finally even. Mara stepped out of the clinic and leaned into the window. Keep 'em warm. Feed light. I'll send you the blood work once it's done. Thanks, Doc. As Nate pulled away, he didn't turn. The cruiser toured home. He had a new route now, one that didn't follow department protocol but followed the signs. And all signs pointed to something bigger than 3 broken pups and a bag of needles. He just didn't know how big yet. The afternoon sun stretched low and warm across the streets of Maple Ridge, casting long shadows from the lampposts onto the sidewalk like ink spilled across parchment. Inside the precinct's modest tech room, Officer Nate Walker leaned over a grainy security monitor paused mid-frame. The footage showed the exterior of Pine and Paws, dated 3 days ago, time-stamped at 6:41 p.m. Their solution wasn't great, but it was good enough. The man in the footage stood just off-center, half-turned from the camera. He wore a long black leather duster that flared with the wind and a faded fedora angled low over his face. His posture was relaxed, too relaxed for someone about to discard 3 lives. Slung in his right hand was a metal suitcase, the kind used more for transporting tools or medical gear than anything a regular person would carry to a vet. Nate hit play. The man looked around once too casually, then shoved open the clinic's side door. A moment later, he emerged without the case. Behind him, 3 dark shapes squirmed weakly in a box placed beside the rack. Ember, Bruno, and Piper, before they'd been strung up like forgotten merchandise. The man didn't linger. He walked back to a dusty silver pickup, tossed his coat behind him, and drove off. "Freeze it," Nate said aloud, even though no one else was there. He tapped the screen when the truck's rear license plate came into focus, partially obstructed by grime, but legible enough with enhancement. Software. Back in his office, Nate input the numbers into the department's vehicle trace system. Within seconds, the screen flashed with results. Registered to Lyle Darnell, age 58, last known address, Millersfield, New Mexico. The name hit Nate like a gust of cold wind. Lyle Darnell had surfaced before during a joint investigation out of El Paso 4 years earlier. Back then, he'd been suspected of running a black market kennel, supplying trained dogs to buyers across state lines. The Operation Waslick Dogs pumped, full of enhancers taught aggressive commands, then sold to private security firms, or more, troublingly, criminal organizations looking for canine muscle. The charges never stuck. By the time the feds raided the compound, Darnell was long gone, and the evidence had conveniently disappeared. Nate opened the file and skimmed the notes. No prior arrests, multiple aliases, known to use disposable phones. Traveled frequently between Arizona and Colorado, always a step ahead. Rex let out a low growl from the corner of the room. "You remember him, don't you?" Nate said quietly. Rex got to his feet, walked to the screen, and sniffed the frozen image of the metal case Darnell had carried. Then he sat down, tail twitching. Once. The same sharp reaction he'd had in the vet clinic near the heater. "That's the scent," Nate muttered. "It's the same damn chemical." Rex barked once, short and clear. The confirmation settled Nate's doubts into something solid. Darnell hadn't just dumped those puppies. He was part of a chain, and this time he'd left behind more than bruised fur and broken trust. That evening, Nate brought the 3 pups into his backyard, a modest stretch of fenced grass behind his 2-bedroom ranch home, where Rex had spent his retirement morning sunbathing. The puppies, stronger now, toddled across the yard with clumsy curiosity. Bruno chewed a shoe. Ember chased a falling leaf like it owed her money. Piper stayed closest to the porch steps, flinching when a nearby truck backfired. Nate had been experimenting with simple commands to see what the pups retained. That evening, while Ember was chewing on a rope toy, Nate gave a short, sharp whistle. To his surprise, Ember immediately sat, tail twitching, eyes locked onto him like a cadet awaiting further orders. "Rex, did you see that?" Rex, lying in the grass, opened one eye. Nate tried another whistle pattern, followed by a low flashlight flick. Piper, previously trembling, froze. Her ears dropped, and she cowered, not in fear, but in expectation, like she was bracing for a blow or waiting for the next command. They were trained, Nate murmured, not just handled. Trained for something. Bruno, on the other hand, rolled over onto his back and pawed at the air, clearly uninterested in commands or theories. Nate chuckled once, but the weight settled fast again. Trained pups, chemical injections, and a man with a history of disappearing just in time. This wasn't random. This wasn't over. He pulled out his phone and called a contact in Denver Deputy Sarah Kendrick, mid-30s, sharp-eyed and known for her pattern tracking work. They'd met during a conference in Boulder last year and kept an occasional touch. Sarah had a lean frame, thick, dark hair usually tied in a braided bun, and a nose for corruption that had nearly gotten her kicked off the force twice. When she picked up, Nate explained what he had so far. The footage, the injections, the puppy's behavior, the scent match Rex had confirmed. "You think Darnell's starting up again?" she asked. "I think he never stopped. I'll check animal permit, databases. If he's moving dogs in volume, someone's processing papers somewhere. Give me 24 hours. I owe you." "No. You owe me lunch. Get in line." As the sun dipped, Nate sat on the porch steps beside Rex, watching the three pups settle in a sleepy pile against the grass. Ember stood last, eyes locked on the field beyond the fence, like she was waiting for something or someone. "You were made to follow," Nate said softly. "But now you get to lead." Rex huffed and nudged Ember's flank. She laid down. From inside the house, the scent of warmed-up chili floated out through the open screen. Nate didn't know where Darnell was yet, but he knew exactly what he looked like, what he carried, and what he'd left behind. This time, he wouldn't get away clean. The road to the outskirts of Maple Ridge narrowed into a gravel trail barely wider than Nate's cruiser. The trees leaned in, close, branches scraping the roof like whispering fingers. Twilight had settled in, painting the sky a murky violet, and every dip in the path felt like a quiet warning. Officer Nate Walker tightened his grip on the wheel as the headlights picked out the rotted sign half buried in weeds. Bluff Creek Kennels, closed until further notice. The boards beneath it were warped and gray, splintered by time and weather. From the dash, Rex let out a low, weary growl. "This is the place," Nate said quietly. "Let's see what secrets you're hiding." Rex was all ready, shifting his weight, nose pressed to the passenger window. His ears twitched at the silence. No barking, no rustling, just the heavy hush of a place long abandoned or carefully staged to appear so. They parked behind a thicket of wild juniper cutting the engine. Nate stepped out and scanned the horizon. The building ahead was a wide, single-lee ranch structure with a collapsing tin roof and broken windows, but the fencing was still intact, too intact for a place supposedly shut down years ago. Nate clicked his flashlight on, but kept it low. Rex stayed close, nose to the dirt, muscles coiled. The two moved silently around the perimeter. There was no movement inside the building. No scent of food, waste, or even decay. Just earth. Dry, clean. They reached the side of the structure where an old shed leaned at a crooked angle. Its door creaked open slightly. Rex paused, nose flaring, then let out a soft bark twice. The signal they'd used for potential danger. Inside the shed, the dust was thick, but the floor was scraped clean in one wide path. At the far end was a hatch, set into the ground. A padlock hung from the latch, but it wasn't locked. Nate crouched, heart pounding, and lifted the hatch slowly. Cold air rushed upward, stale, coppery. Beneath, a short stairwell descended into darkness. "Stay behind me," Nate whispered and started down. The stairs creaked under his boots, and the air turned damp. He raked the bottom and clicked his flashlight higher. A concrete corridor stretched ahead, barely wide enough for two people to walk shoulder to shoulder. Rex descended silently, staying close. The hallway led to a small open space, a holding room. Rows of metal kennels lined both sides, but none were occupied. No barking, no whimpering, just silence. But the floor told a different story. Straw scattered. In clumps stained a deep rust brown, scratches on the kennel bars, nail marks in the concrete, a broken water bowl kicked into the corner. And in one cage, something worse. A trail of coarse black fur matted and stuck to the fencing, blood smeared in uneven streaks near the drain. Rex growled again, low and uneasy. Then he pulled sharply toward the far end of the room where a mound of hay had been carelessly dumped in the corner. Nate followed, flashlight sweeping wide. Rex began to dig. The straw gave way to a torn plastic tarp, and beneath it, a heavy-duty burlap sack stiff with age. Rex clawed once, then stepped back. Nate knelt and pulled the sack open. The air turned sour. Inside were bones, dozens, small skulls, femurs, jawbones with teeth still attached, dog bones at least 6 or 7 different sizes. Nate swallowed hard, forcing bile back, and nestled near the bottom, a small plastic capsulist for microchips. He bagged the bones and chip, snapping photos of the kennel walls, the blood trails, the marks. Rex stood sentinel, his posture locked and tense, eyes fixed on the entrance as if expecting something or someone to return. "I don't think this place was abandoned," Nate muttered. "I think it was emptied in a hurry." That night, the puppies stayed in the back office, now converted into a temporary playpen. Ember had torn through the corner of her kennel pad. Piper refused to sit under the light. She kept hiding behind the desk every time someone passed by the hallway. Bruno simply slept belly up as if unaware of the tension mounting around them. Nate called Dr. Mara Jensen just past 9:30 p.m. She picked up on the second ring. "Sorry to bother you this late," he said, "but I've got something you need to look at." By 10, she was in the office dressed in jeans and a faded college sweatshirt, hair pulled back in a rushed ponytail. She took the microchip capsule from Nate, handling it with gloved fingers, then scanned it through her portable reader. "Registration. Code found," she said. "Give me a second." She typed on her tablet, then froze. Nate leaned in. "What is it?" "This chip belongs to a dog named Jax, registered K9 unit, 3 years ago, Colorado State Patrol." "Wait," Nate said, breath catching. "That dog went missing in the raid, same one that forced Rex into early retirement." Marla looked up, eyes narrowing. "So, one of these puppies is Jax's offspring?" Nate turned to look at the pen. Ember sat nearest to the bars, her stare steady and far too aware for a pup her age. "They didn't just breed any dogs," he said. "They bred K9s for sale." Mara nodded slowly, and if they had Jax, they probably had others. Nate sat down hard on the edge of the desk. Rex came to rest beside him, placing one paw across his boot. It all clicked into place. Stolen canines, forced breeding, hormone enhancement, black market training, and dogs either sold or discarded if they didn't perform. "This was a farm," Nate whispered. "A ghost kennel. And it wasn't quiet because it was empty. It was quiet because something terrible had already happened." The wind swept low across the chain-link fences of an abandoned construction site on the edge of Pine Luff, a forgotten stretch of concrete where weeds broke through cracks like survivors. Floodlights flickered at the corners too bright for the time of night, revealing just enough to make it feel legitimate and just little enough to keep the police guessing. Officer Nate Walker parked the rust-bitten van alongside a row of unmarked vehicles. His badge was tucked away in his boot. On the seat beside him, Rex shifted, disguised with a frayed rope leash, his normally brushed coat dusted with dirt. The bent ear, the scarred leg, those stayed the same. Nate exhaled and stepped out, leading Rex like a man with a mutt to sell or trade. He wore an oil-stained jacket, faded jeans, and a trucker cap, low over his eyes. He looked the part. He needed to, from. Behind a nearby sedan, a woman stepped forward. Chloe Navarro, 34, was a special agent with the FBI's Organized Animal Trafficking Task Force. Slender Latina with sharp features and sharper instincts, Chloe had the gait of someone who trusted her sidearm more than small talk. Her dark hair was tied up under a gray hoodie, and a radio buzzed quietly in her ear. "You're late," she said, checking over Rex with a practiced glance. "I took the scenic route." Chloe handed him a laminated number card. "You're bitter 12. Say as little as possible. Act like you're desperate for a mean dog but short on cash. Most of these sellers love that. Any confirmation it's the Darnell ring?" Nothing solid, but the layout fits his style. Underground exchange. Word of mouth. No phones. Only cash. Nate nodded. Rex growled low. One sharp, throaty pulse. They entered, through a side gate where a man with a clipboard grunted, looked Nate over, then waved him inside. The warehouse was little more than a hollowed-out shell of what once had been a supply depot concrete floor. Rusted beams, tarps strung between support pillars. The smell of ammonia and sawdust clung to the air. To the left, makeshift kennels had been assembled from fencing panels and plywood. Dogs, mostly German Shepherds and Malinois, sat motionless too, still, too quiet. They weren't barking. They were waiting. Rex stiffened beside Nate, his body posture shifting. His tail dropped, his muscles tensed. On a raised platform at the back, a man in a leather trench coat and sunglasses adjusted a microphone. He tapped it twice. "Auction starts in 10. All dogs have basic obedience and first-tier aggression response. Test before bidding. No refunds. No returns." Chloe faded into the crowd near the rear, speaking softly into her radio. Nate made his way down the aisle between kennels, pretending to evaluate the dogs. He paused in front of a black shepherd with yellow eyes and a scare over its left flank. Its nose twitched. It didn't bark, didn't move. And then Rex stopped. Nate felt it before he saw it. Rex's low growl, the kind that rumbled like a held breath. Rex's eyes were locked across the room toward a figure standing half-shadowed beneath a tarp. The man wore the same long leather coat from the raid photos. His build was wiry, his nose crooked from an old break. A pale tattoo curled up his neck from his collar. Rex growled again, not in warning. In recognition, Nate's stomach tightened. This was the man from the hidden kennels, the one the pups feared, the one Rex remembered. Rex took one step forward. Nate stopped him with a tap to the flank. Not yet. A whistle blew. First lot K9B3 female shepherd, 8 months first response trained. Narcotic neutralized, silent command responsive. A handler dragged a trembling pup onto the stage. Nate's heart twisted. It was Piper's size. He looked to the holding cages and saw her, not Piper, but nearly identical. The same wide eyes, same hesitant step. She responded to the handler's voice, flinched at the word casa, the same Spanish command Nate had heard Piper react to earlier in the week. Her ears pinned, tail dropped, frozen in place. It hadn't been trauma. It had been training. Nate stepped back and whispered into his sleeve, confirmed. "These dogs are trained for cartel use." T. Command matches what our pup responded to. Chloe's voice came through. "We have visual on at least 20 dogs. Half are tagged, others look custom bred. Handler is matching Darnell's description from El Paso, but we need a trigger." As the auction continued, Nate moved closer to the leather-coated man. Rex remained glued to the scent, low growls rumbling through his chest. The man noticed. He turned slowly, his eyes scanning Rex's face. Then he froze. He knew Rex and Rex knew him. In that instant, the man lunged toward the side exit. Nate dropped the leash. "Go!" Rex shot forward like Abelet. The crowd scattered. Chloe shouted into her comms, "Where green, take it down!" Rex cut through the clutter, dodging cages and chairs. T-Man reached the door, but Rex was faster. He launched, tackling the figure at the knees. The two tumbled hard against the door frame. By the time Nate caught up, the man was pinned, Rex's teeth near his throat growling softly. Chloe arrived with 2 agents in cuffs. "We've got our buyer. Name's Colt Raider, been wanted in 3 states. He's connected to Darnell, one of his top trainers." Colt spat blood. "You think this changes anything?" Nate said nothing. Rex didn't blink. As Colt was dragged away, the dogs in the cages finally began to bark, not in fear, but in noise. Like something had broken, like silence had lost. The rain came harder that night, as if the sky itself mourned the things that had been done in silence behind rusted doors. Officer Noah Reeves stood by the open cruiser door, his eyes fixed on the glowing red dot on the GPS tablet in his hand. The signal, the one Chloe and Nate had secretly planted under the trailer at the auction, had stopped moving 2 hours ago, just outside the industrial edge of Harper's Bluff. Next to him, Rex sat poised, ears forward, nose twitching. The old German shepherd had been tense since they lost sight of Ember, the young female shepherd who had slipped from the shelter earlier that afternoon. She had tracked the scent of one of the auction men, a cruel handler with a cigarette burn, scar across his wrist. Chloe recognized him, and Ember never forgot. Noah's grip tightened around the tablet. "She's leading us right into it," he said. Deputy Chloe stepped out of her own vehicle behind him. Her auburn hair was soaked, strands clinging to her cheeks. "We got authorization. SW at T's on standby. It's go time." But it wasn't just a tactical decision. It was personal. Too many dogs, including Ember and even Rex in his earlier life, had suffered because of people like the ones they were about to confront. The warehouse loomed ahead like a rotting beast. Corrugated metal siding hung loose, and a single flickering light buzzed near the entrance. Noah's team moved in silence, 5 officers in tactical black forming a perimeter. Then came the low growl, not from Rex, but from somewhere inside, and then a yelp, short, sharp, panicked. Rex's body tensed. His hackles rose, and without needing a command, he moved forward. Noah followed, gun raised. They entered through the side door Chloe had found unlatched. Inside, the warehouse was worse than they imagined. Metal crates lined the walls, not for cargo, but for dogs, crates barely big enough to stand. Inside, the air rire of fear, urine, and blood. Dogs whimpered and barked behind bars, some too weak to make a sound. Rex moved from crate to crate, nose working frantically. He paused at one, a shepherd mixed with a deep gash across his chest. The dog lifted his head weakly, ears twitching. "That's Bruno," Chloe whispered. "He was on the list." "We thought he was already shipped overseas." Noah knelt and broke the lock, but Rex had already moved ahead, tail low, silent now. A soldier on a mission. At the back of the warehouse, behind stacked cages and tarps, was a smaller door. Rex pawed at it once, then looked back. Noah nodded. "Let's go." Beyond the door was what looked like a private training room. Mats, chains, metal poles, even a blood-stained vest on a hook. But it wasn't empty. Standing in the center of the room was a man in a gray hoodie, holding a taser in one hand and a choke leash in the other, and cowering near the wall was Ember. Her eyes met Rex's, wild, frightened, bottleive. The man turned at the noise. "Get back!" he shouted. "She's mine!" But before he could move, Rex lunged. The ears melted off his muscles as he flew, jaws clamping down on the man's wrist with precision honed from training. The taser clattered too. The floor. The man screamed, but Rex held just long enough for Noah and Chloe to subdue him. Amber didn't run. She slowly approached Rex, sniffed his shoulder, then collapsed beside him. Exhausted, safe. The rest of the night was chaos. Officers stormed in. SWAT swept the rest of the compound. They found 12 more dogs, most with signs of abuse or neglect. Piper was discovered in a crate near the furnace room, drugged but alive. Nate carried her out himself, tears streaking his muddy cheeks. Chloe cataloged every dog with trembling hands, documenting injuries and logging names. For the first time in years, she felt like she was doing more than just paperwork. She was restoring dignity to creatures that had only known pain. Noah, meanwhile, stood beside Rex as the medical team checked his jaw and paw. "You did good, partner," he whispered. Rex leaned against his leg, eyes already scanning the room for new threats. He was tired, but not broken. Never broken. That same night, across town, a young journalist named Emily Crane received an anonymous envelope slid under her door. Inside was a USB drive labeled Sanctuary Records Internal Use Only. It contained footage of the auction, including the faces of several local officials in attendance. Emily had once been silenced for exposing corruption in the animal shelter system, but this time she had names, faces, and proof. She picked up her phone and dialed. "Sheriff Lehman, it's Crane. I have something you'll want to see." By sunrise, the warehouse was sealed as a crime scene, and the dogs were en route to a veterinary facility in Cedar Valley. Chloe rode in the back, with Piper and Bruno. While Ember curled up beside Rex in the canine cage, finally sleeping, Noah drove in silence, glancing in the rearview mirror at Rex. He thought about how he found him, bruised, chained, silent in that corner of the flea market. And now here he was, protector, hero, leader. Some dogs are born with a heart too big for cages. The morning sun filtered through the broken blinds of the Pinehurst Precinct's K9 unit quarters, casting warm slats of light across the tiled floor. Nate Morgan, still in his sweatpants and an old Academy hoodie, sipped black coffee by the window. His bruises from the raid wear fading, but the deeper wounds, those left by betrayal, by the auction, by what the dogs had endured, remained. Curled up beside him was Rex, the 10-year-old German shepherd with a sable coat streaked with silver, one ear permanently bent, and a long scar down his hind leg. Once a hardened K9, now the steady heartbeat of this fractured pack. In a corner of the room, the three puppies, Piper, Bruno, and Ember, each showed signs of cautious hope. Piper, the smallest, was curled beneath an old wool blanket Rex had nudged toward her the night before. Her paws twitched slightly in sleep, but for the first time since being rescued, her body wasn't curled into a trembling ball. Instead, she lay stretched out, breathing softly, unafraid. Bruno, larger than his siblings and eternally eager, had taken to mimicking Rex's every move. That morning, he'd dragged one of Nate's house slippers from the front hallway, proudly placing it at the officer's feet with his tail wagging furiously. Amber, the most vigilant, sat upright near the back door. Amber, eyes fixed on the outside world. She had already barked once during the night when a raccoon scuttled past the fence. Nate hadn't even heard it, but Rex had a low growl in his throat. Then silence. Amber, watching, learning. Chloe Navarro arrived just past 9 a.m., wearing a black turtleneck under her FBI windbreaker, her dark brown hair pinned up in a loose bun. She handed Nate a file folder, but he waved it off. "You could have emailed," he said, smiling faintly. "I could have," she replied, setting the folder down anyway. "But I wanted to see how the pack was settling." She crouched to Bruno's level, letting him sniff her hand before she scratched his ears. "They're different," she said. Nate nodded. "Yeah, and they're staying." Chloe blinked, surprised. "You sure? That's a lot for one man to handle." He looked at Rex, who was now grooming Ember's ears with slow, methodical licks. They deserve peace. And Rex, he's teaching them. It's like he's not just healing, he's becoming something more, Chloe stood. "You know, I pulled Rex's old file," she said quietly. "Most of it's redacted." But what wasn't? He served in Operation Iron Wake, urban collapse scenario, multiple rescues. He pulled 3 children from a collapsed school building under sniper fire. Nate's brow furrowed. They said he was just a patrol dog. They lied. Someone wanted his record buried. Maybe because he saw too much. Maybe because they wanted to discard him when he became inconvenient. Rex, as if sensing their conversation, turned his head toward them. His gaze wasn't bitter. It was calm, almost fatherly. "Whatever they tried to erase," Nate said, "he's rebuilding here." Outside, the precinct's backyard had been converted into a makeshift training yard. A few old tires, cones, and crates lay scattered across the grass. Nate led the 3 pups outside, tossing a tennis ball toward the center. Bruno raced after it, bounding over a crate with reckless joy. Piper hesitated, looking to Rex. The older dog gave a single bark low and encouraging. Piper bolted forward, her tail rising slightly for the first time. Ember didn't chase the ball. She paced the perimeter, nose to the ground, investigating. Always the sentinel. Later that afternoon, Chief Harland A. Broadman, with a barrel chest and a fading crew cut, dropped by Nate's office. He leaned against the door frame, arms folded. "You've got eyes on you, Morgan," he said. "State Department likes what you did. They're talking about promotion. Unit Commander Nate didn't hesitate. Thanks, but I'm staying right where I am." Harland raised a brow. "That's not exactly career smart." "I'm not chasing stripes," Nate said. "I'm building something better." As Harland left, Chloe leaned into the doorway, a knowing smile on her lips. "Father of 3, huh?" Nate chuckled. "Guess I've got responsibilities now." That night, the 4 dogs lay together in the den. Rex stretched across the center and the pups curled close. Nate dimmed the lights and sat nearby, filling out a few final reports. On the table beside him lay a small tag with freshly engraved names: Piper, Bruno, Ember, home. He picked up the tag and held it in his palm, then looked at Rex. "You're not alone anymore, old boy." Rex blinked slowly, then rested his head at Top Piper's back. And for the first time in a long time, there were no nightmares, only peace. The first golden rays of spring broke through the misty dawn, painting Maple Ridge in hues of hope. Nate stood in the backyard of his modest cottage, surveying the wooden structure he had built with his own hands. It wasn't large, nor did it have locks or surveillance cameras. Just a simple wooden sign hung above the open gate. "Here you are not for sale." The words burned into the grain with care were more than a message. They were a vow. Rex lay nearby on the porch, his head resting on crossed, paws, his scarred legs stretched comfortably to the side. The 10-year-old German Shepherd, with assable coat streaked in silver and one bent ear, had seen more than most humans ever would. Now his days of fear and battle were behind him, replaced by evenings filled with quiet skies and the sound of young paws stumbling in the grass. The 3 puppies, Piper, Bruno, and Ember, had grown quickly in the weeks since their rescue. Piper remained the most curious, often nosing through Nate's garden and trying to decipher human tools. Bruno, heavier built and slower, liked to nap beside Rex, occasionally mimicking his mentor's stoic watch. Ember, sleek and alert, had developed an uncanny ability to detect people even before the doorbell rang. Their wounds had healed, but the emotional scars would take longer. Yet here in this home without locks, they were learning that love didn't come with a price tag. It was a Saturday when Sheriff Alden, a burly man in his early 50s with graying temples and a gruff voice, arrived. Unannounced, despite his usual rigid demeanor, today he wore a dark blue dress uniform, polished boots, and held a velvet-covered box in his hand. "Hope you don't mind, officer," he said, tipping his hat to Nate, "but the town council has something to say." Behind him trailed a group of neighbors, townspeople, and fellow officers. Among them was young Jimmy Carr, no older than 10, with shaggy brown hair and nervous eyes. He held something tightly in his fist. Nate opened the gate fully, motioning them in. Rex, sensing the shift in energy, stood slowly and limped to Nate's side. "Rex," the sheriff began, clearing his throat, "what you did, what you continue to do for this town, for our people, it deserves more than a plaque. It deserves our trust." With that, he opened the velvet box to reveal a brass medallion engraved, with the words, "Guardian of Maple Ridge." The symbol of the town's crest shimmered underneath. Sheriff Alden bent down and clasped the medal gently to Rex's collar. But it was Jimmy who stepped forward with trembling hands, reaching into his pocket to pull out a simple leather collar. The boy had once been pulled from a freezing drainage ditch by Rex's jaws after running from a drunken stepfather. He didn't speak. He just reached out and fastened the collar over the old one. Carved in neat, uneven letters were the words, "Guardian." Rex didn't bark. He didn't move. He simply leaned into the boy's touch and closed his eyes. Later that afternoon, Piper, Bruno, and Ember chased each other under the birch trees, while Nate spoke with Chloe Navarro, the FBI agent who had helped dismantle the underground dog auction ring. Clue, dressed in a tan blazer over jeans, leaned against the porch rail, arms crossed, watching the pups play. "They're ready," she said. Themis accepted them into the K-9 candidate program. All three, Nate exhaled slowly. They deserve that. They deserve a life with purpose. "So do you, Nate," she added quietly. He didn't respond. But in the pause, Rex patted over, nudging Nate's hand as if to agree. That night, the town held a candlelight gathering in the small square. Families came, candles were lit, and stories were shared. Not just of crimes stopped or lives saved, but of quiet moments. Of Rex sitting beside the town's veterans on Memorial Day. Of the way he never barked at children, even when they tugged his ears. Of how, after everything, he never lost faith in people. When they returned home, Nate unlatched the gate knot that it was ever really locked and let the pups tumble inside. The moon was high, stars scattered like whispers across the sky. Rex, as he always did, took his place on the porch under the eaves, his body curled but alert. He watched the yard until his breathing slowed, then finally closed his eyes. The word guardian, catching the moonlight on his collar. There was no lock on the gate, and there never would be. Because freedom once tasted could never be taken again. And because sometimes the truest home is not made of walls or wood, but of promises kept. Sometimes miracles do not arrive with lightning or trumpets. They come quietly in the shape of a battered German shepherd who refuses to give up in the eyes of a child who dares to trust again, or in the quiet resolve of a man who builds a home with no locks, only love. "Here you are not for sale." That sign wasn't just for the dogs. It was a promise to every broken soul that walked through pain and still chose kindness. Rex was not just a dog. He was a guardian sent not by accident, but by divine timing. A reminder that even when the world abandons you, God hasn't. His miracles often wear fur, arrive limping, and sit beside you without asking for anything but your presence. And perhaps in our own lives, we are called to be someone's Rex, to protect, to believe, and to make space for healing without condition. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to be reminded that hope is real, that second chances exist, and that God still sends guardians when we least expect it. Drop a comment below if you've ever experienced a quiet miracle in your life. Write amen if you believe that God still works through love, loyalty, and second chances. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Let's keep sharing stories that restore faith in humanity. May God bless every heart that reads this, and every soul that needs a home with no